There was a shootout in Pulse, the nightclub.
Do you remember where you were when it happened?
Okay, there's people.
All you could hear was boom, bang, bang.
It's terrible. He's my only child.
But a city attacked in terror.
We have officers inside the building. We're just trying to figure out how to get to you and get you out.
June 12, 2016.
It was like, stop, then it went again,
49 lives would end inside Pulse nightclub.
And hundreds more would carry scars for life.
All I could do was just lay down there while everyone was just running on top of me.
We heard the need for blood, so we really wanted to come down and try to do something.
We gathered together.
I love you, Orlando.
Mourned together. And united, Orlando got stronger.
Now a whole year has passed. How do we move forward from here? And is there any way to make sure this never happens again?
This is a special presentation on Channel 9 Eyewitness News. Pulse, 1 year later. Reflect and envision.
When the Pulse terror attack happened, the street in front of the club was closed for weeks.
Orlando had nowhere to grieve, and slowly to the quiet lawns of the new Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, we came.
With candles, signs, and prayers. It was a memorial even a president would visit to honor Orlando Strong.
And that's why Channel 9 Eyewitness News is taking you back here tonight.
We felt there was no better place for a frank discussion about where we've been over this past year after Pulse and where we go from here.
We've brought in survivors, friends, and top community leaders. It could get emotional tonight, but we'll get through it together.
So let's go inside and talk with people about where we've been, where we're going, and how Orlando is now a better community and what we need to do going forward. All right, so let's begin and introduce this esteemed panel of community leaders and individuals who were touched by Pulse in one way or another. They'll share their stories tonight. First, we have Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, who really helped guide the community with his news conferences and, of course, his actions after Pulse. Orange County Mayor Teresa Jacobs as well on the forefront of this terrible news, breaking it to the community and helping the community heal. Orlando Police Chief John Mina and his team, just so impressive with their bravery, as well as Orange County Sheriff Jerry Dimmings. The same goes for his team and the leadership of all these individuals.
And we're also joined by Dr. Chadwick Smith, one of the ORMC surgeons working this tragedy in the morning of the attack, as well as Barbara Poma, the owner of Pulse nightclub. And immediately to our left, we're honored to have two people who survived this attack, Nima Barami and Orlando Torres. We welcome all of you to our panel tonight and for participating.
Martha and I will get the conversation started with some questions for our panelists. Then we'll follow up with our audience made up of local officials, business leaders, Pulse survivors, friends, and family for their questions. So a lot of folks in this room will have their chance to ask questions and also share their story.
We're going to start, though, by hearing from our panel right now. And two of the survivors from that night. Orlando, you were there that night. You were actually hiding in the same bathroom as the gunman Omar Mateen. We just saw the video from the Orlando Police Department about what went on. Tell us from your perspective what you went through that night.
Well, it was a very horrifying evening, something that we didn't anticipate to happen in our home. You know, I lost a lot of dear friends and other, you know, innocent lives were lost just as well. But it was a tragic evening that we didn't anticipate something like ever to happen in our home of Pulse nightclub. So when it all happened, we didn't know what was the agenda of that gunman until he spoke and said what he was there for. And that's made us more scared, worrying about all our lives, because we know terrorists, when they go, they take a lot of people's lives as well as their own.
And Nima, as an event manager at Pulse, you actually helped save lives that night. Can you tell your story?
That night was a very emotional night for me. At that point, I felt that I was in survival mode. Being an event manager and bringing people into your space of love and for hate to enter. For my opinion, I don't find it as much as a terrorist attack. I find it more as a hate crime. And I felt that night that hate entered, and whatever I had to do was what I needed to do to make sure that everybody was okay.
And we're both so glad that you're here with us today.
Orlando, your story is one that we have not heard publicly, and tonight we're going to learn more about how you survived.
Yes.
Tell us about the moments in the bathroom and how you managed to make it out alive.
When I went into the females' restroom with my friend to use the stall, at one point we heard pow, 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 and my friend said, "Oh, that's the music effect." And I said, "No, I know my DJ's music effect. It is a pow, pow, pow with an air horn at the end." And I said, "That don't sound right." So I heard it again. And from there I said, "We're not going out there. We're not going out there into the club area until we know what those popping sounds are." So I decided to lay on top of the toilet seat, lift my feet up. My friend followed my lead. So when the gunman came in, did not see our feet underneath. So, because you can see it as you come in, you can look underneath, there's a space. And he just proceeded to shoot to the back stall where other people were in the bigger handicap stall.
And you survived based on those actions and the actions of brave officers.
Yes.
Officer Tim Stanley, who was there to carry you out of Pulse, is with us tonight.
Yes.
Officer Stanley, if you could please stand.
Yeah.
Officer Tim Stanley. We have seen the video this week from the body cameras of those officers, so we have a little bit of a picture of what that was like. But as you see him tonight, and remember back a year ago when you saw him that night coming to rescue you.
Yeah, I couldn't remember clearly. You know, everything happened so fast, and it was stressful, and you know, and I was introduced at one of the fashion shows that we did here in Orlando at the Orlando Eye, and that's when I had first met him. And it broke down my heart in tears that I didn't even know how to express, saying thank you very much.
Did you think you were going to make it out?
No, I didn't think so. I didn't think so.
Let's go to the local leaders as well, government leaders, law enforcement on the panel. We've heard of what has happened. Let's start with you, Mayor Dyer. Do you feel as though we're safer 1 year later?
It's hard to protect against every possible event, but I think that our law enforcement is well trained, they're well equipped, they can respond to about any type of event that we have. Their training kicked in on the night of June the 12th. I talked to so many of our first responders and our dispatchers that said as soon as it started happening, I was so glad that I had that training because it just kicked in, and the decisions that I made were the right decisions to be made, but it was because we've done so much training.
Mayor Jacobs?
I would agree. I think we are definitely safer because of the additional training and the lessons learned, although I can't say enough about the way law enforcement responded and all the first responders handled the situation at the time. But I think anytime you go through something like this, there's always an opportunity to understand how to better prepare.
And I have a question for you, Chief Mina. We know that you've lectured around the world. You've been to Dubai, and it seems every other city, country in between, and people are asking you to discuss your department's handling of the Pulse terror attack. What's the one thing that Pulse taught you? You have 26 years of law enforcement, and in hindsight, is there something that you would have done differently during Pulse?
Well, first of all, going to different departments and having them learn from you is not a new phenomenon. Law enforcement does a good job. We've been doing that for decades, and it's our responsibility to teach the rest of law enforcement around the country, around the world, the challenges we face, how we responded. One of the main things that I emphasize in these conferences is the training and the preparation. So since 9/11, since Columbine, since many of the terrorist attacks around the world, the Central Florida law enforcement community has been preparing for these type of events. Now, obviously, I don't think anyone could have foreseen what happened the night of June 12th, but what I explained to them is our officers dealt with probably one of the most difficult, unique, and complex terrorist mass shooting incidents that I believe U.S. law enforcement has ever faced. And I believe the officers and the commanders on the ground in real time making life and death decisions, followed the proper course of action, put their lives at risk the entire night, and saved many, many lives that night.
And as for Pulse nightclub owner Barbara Poma, we've gotten to the point, do you think we've gotten to the point where we need metal detectors in clubs, any major venue with a large amount of people or gatherings?
No, we would hope that we haven't gotten to that point, and you don't know if that would have changed what happened at Pulse that night. So I'm just not really sure. I mean, I know that we take extra safety precautions at all of our events as far as wanding and back checks, but we haven't gotten to the point of actual metal detectors. I'm not ruling it out. It probably is a good.
Have you found that people who come out, are they still coming out? Do they feel that it's safe to go out?
You know, some people are and some people are not. You know, it's only been 11 months, almost a year. So, you know, I just think people are in different places of healing, and when they're ready, they will, and some may never be ready. But I do know that those safety precautions that we have taken and other clubs around Orlando have taken have surely made them feel safer.
Sheriff Demings, you are privy to intel. Central Florida is filled with soft targets, whether it's a nightclub like Pulse. What did we learn from Pulse about our other targets here? Should we all be more concerned, or are we now better prepared?
We are better prepared today. From my perspective, I believe we try to anticipate the unexpected in incidents like this, and we're very fortunate here that we've managed a number of different disasters here in our area. And sometimes, regardless of whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, there are some things that we learn about how we come together across disciplines, law enforcement, fire, EMS, to manage a crisis. And so what I saw happen in this incident was all of those disciplines that came together. In fact, here in this community, we had trained with the hospitals on a mass casualty event. And because of that training, we were able to respond very efficiently.
And the other heroes in all of this, besides law enforcement, the medical team that so quickly reacted to what unfolded that day. Dr. Chadwick Smith, your team saved so many lives on June 12th during an event obviously we hope we never, ever witness again. What's the one image or one story that will stay with you?
I think, you know, the thing that stands out for me for our team's response, it was, it doesn't work as well if people have to wait to be told what to do. And for everybody to come together and perform independently, I think that's what sticks out in my mind the most. And that only happens with proper training.
Are there some things that you learned that may help us, God forbid, we have to deal with this again?
You know, I think as we've gone around to different places across the country and spoken, it is unsettling to know how many hospitals or other healthcare institutions don't have a disaster plan. And while that may never happen to any specific institution, and we hope it never happens, as I've said before, hoping and being prepared are two different things.
So anyone else want to ask a question? Okay, we'll bring the mic over to you.
Chief Mina, you're the person who had to lead this department through this. It's been a tough year. Before this, you had the Grimmy shooting, then the attack of the child at Disney, and then the intense search for Markeith Lloyd. Who helped you through it?
I would be lying if I said this has been easy or I knew exactly what to do through all these trying times, but I will say that what helped me was my family. And as far as the department and the city, I am surrounded by an incredible team at the Orlando Police Department, and as well as the mayor and his staff, who really, although I'm in the forefront of a lot of this, helped guide me through this. But it has been a difficult year, and our police department, we've always considered ourselves a big family, and that has really shown this past year and helped us get through that. We wouldn't be able to get through this without each other.
And I think I want to ask Mayor Dyer this, as leader, one of the leaders in our community, how do you get through it yourself, rally the people in our community, and tell the world that it is safe to come to Orlando?
You know, I did the debriefs with OPD and OFD, I guess, a couple days after Pulse, and I had a friend of mine who's a counselor call about a week after Pulse and just said, hey, how are you doing? And I said, you know, I'm doing fine, but I don't feel like I'm feeling the emotion that I think that I should. And she said, you can't feel that. You're leading right now, and you can't break down. You can't not do your job, and you're doing your job and you're focused on your job. So it's only really in the last, I'd say 60 to 90 days, because we had a period of time where we weren't as focused on the events of the 12th as we were on getting the One Orlando Fund distributed, working on the Victims Assistance Center, and public records request. But in the last...
You were busy taking care of everyone else.
But the last 90 days, it's been, we've had, I don't know, I've had 4 interviews today related to Pulse. So it's now reliving this so many times. And I can't imagine if you were in the restroom, you know, for the 3 hours, having now at this point, reliving and reliving and reliving.
Grief counselor Dwight Bain, who was in the room, talks about a 1-year mark being as painful as the actual event in terms of emotions for the community.
You know, this is the first time I've heard Mayor Dyer express what he felt, and I'm amazed at how similar, although I think everybody knows that I wear my emotions on my sleeve and care passionately about people. I found that for that first 2 weeks, I did not understand why I wasn't feeling the level of utter pain that this community was feeling. I cared, but there was that, almost that emotional shock that you go through to stay on top of what you need to do.
Unfortunately, these are the times we live in. Zomar Mateen was on the watch list twice, yet he was able to legally purchase the guns that he used. Chief Mina and Chief Demings, I would like to ask both of you, who have both been on Capitol Hill, to tell us, does anything need to happen with lawmakers to make it more difficult for somebody who's on a no-fly list or a watch list to be able to legally purchase a weapon of mass destruction?
Well, I believe that if you're on a no-fly list or on any type of list like that, you shouldn't be able to purchase a firearm.
How do we get people to step up, whether they're a gun store owner or on the streets, and say, this guy bought this gun for the wrong reasons?
If we're going to be successful at preventing an attack from occurring, the best way that we can do that is have actionable intelligence information in advance. And so we have to rely on the public to provide that information to us. And so what we have tried to do through an awareness program is communicate to people that if they see something that doesn't look quite right as it relates to their overall safety and security in our community, to share that information with law enforcement at whatever level.
Mayors Dyer and Jacobs, this is a topic that raises emotions on both sides. Do new gun laws even have a chance of even getting considered here in Florida?
Oh, they certainly should, and I think if you look at where the public stands on this issue, there's some. I would expect that there's some low-lying fruit, but it isn't happening. You should not be able to show up at a gun show and buy a gun if you can't show up at a gun shop and buy a gun. And if we can't address that issue, if we can't address the no-fly list and yet you can buy a gun, if we can't address that at a political level, then it leaves me highly doubtful.
And Mayor Dyer, if new laws aren't the answer, then what is?
We've actually gone the opposite direction of what you're suggesting, because 20 years ago we had a ban on assault weapons and armor-piercing bullets at the federal level. And in the last several years, the Florida legislature has banned, restricted local governments from having any regulations relating to gun control of any sort. I agree with the chief that if you're on a no-fly list, you're on a no-fly list for a reason. This is actually the first time I've had a discussion about guns since June the 12th. I've chosen not to get involved in some of the national political things, whether they have been on immigration or gun control, because I felt like that would be using a platform that was not necessary for me to do, because I was more about healing our community.
Dr. Smith, I want to ask you from your perspective. You see the capability These are not Saturday night specials. The injuries that they are inflicting express what you see with the weapons that are being held by our criminals today.
So, you know, a high-powered rifle has, you know, the potential to inflict so much more tissue damage than you know, a handgun. And gun violence, I mean, I don't want to get into a discussion about gun control or pro-gun, anti-gun, but no one is for gun violence. And I think if we can enable the study of gun violence or gun violence instances and figure out, like the NTSB has done with car crashes, how we can, you know, be it community service programs, getting out in the community and talking to kids who, you know, may be going down the wrong road, et cetera.
Let's talk about, Chief Mina, security. All the security in the world may not be enough. Can law enforcement stop a lone wolf?
I think the former FBI director puts it very well, that looking for a lone wolf or the homegrown violent extremist is like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. It's very difficult, and that's why we implore to the community that that's the information we need. They're the ones who are going to see the computer activity or the suspicious behavior or the backpack or the heavy clothing when it's hot out. That's why we need all those eyes out there.
You know, Marmateen was being watched at some point, and he still was able to do what he did.
Yeah, and I don't fault the FBI. I think they've documented very well that, you know, in this country we have laws. There's only certain things we can do, and they really have to triage the people that they investigate, and they just can't follow someone for 20 years when they haven't committed a crime.
We have some elected officials that are on the national level. Would any of them like to comment? Val Demings, our new congresswoman from Central Florida, also former Orlando police chief and the wife of our Orange County sheriff. Ms. Demings, when you hear what's been said here and watch what's happened in your community, what can be done in Washington?
Well, 49 people lost their lives that night in one place. 53 others were injured that night in one place, not doing anything wrong, doing what my bishop referred to as a late night fellowship. One man with 2 guns, an assault rifle and a handgun. Military-style weapons were not designed for our communities or our streets. They were designed for the battlefield. Assault rifles can tear through a brick wall. Imagine what they did to those young, innocent people that night. There was clearly a difference in those that were shot, the injuries, the extent of the injuries of those that were shot with the assault weapon versus the handgun. And, you know, I hate to say that it takes political courage to do the right thing, but I really believe, after being in Washington for 5 months, it takes political courage to do the right thing. Universal background checks. We have to take a test to drive a car in this country. But any person can pretty much walk into a gun show and buy a weapon. And so I can think of no better opportunity to get serious and have a serious discussion about gun safety laws.
What can happen? Where can we go as a community? Where can we raise our hands? Whatever side of gun control or lack thereof you're on, what can we do? Dwight Bain, counselor, I'm certain as Mr. Bain listened to our panelist, he deals with grief counselors. He has been at 9/11, Columbine, has been face-to-face with families and victims. The floor is yours.
Every one of us will remember where we were on June the 12th. There's a basic principle, and the sheriff talked about it, debriefing. And the principle is very powerful. If you talk through it, you can get through it. My hope is that all across Central Florida, people will have conversations tonight. Not conversations of fear and not conversations of hiding, but conversations of being able to talk about something that happens after a crisis, after a shooting. You see, one path goes to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is self-destructive. People become suicidal. But there's another path. It's called post-traumatic growth, PTG. Post-traumatic growth happens when people have conversations and they tell their stories. Post-traumatic growth, do you see it? I'd like to hear about it because I want to keep it going.
I immediately saw, I hadn't heard that term before, post-traumatic growth, but I've had an opportunity to speak at a lot of either crisis management, communication, terrorist things. So I've learned a lot about response to terrorism that I didn't know on June the 12th. And we responded with love, we responded with compassion, and we responded with unity. And I think that's a model for the entire rest of the world. And you can't create that on June the 12th. If we weren't already a community that embraced inclusiveness and diversity and fairness and equality, you can't conjure that up on June the 12th. And this community was already that way. But I think that we have grown, in answer to your question, I think that we have grown even more in the last year, and we're a more resilient community. And there are a lot of people that maybe weren't as accepting of people with different lifestyles or a different ethnic background than they were. And quite honestly, the country's a lot different than it was a year ago right now. But I think in Orlando, we are in a good spot. We're in a bubble right here.
The day after Pulse, I can't believe it was literally the very next night as we all gathered here for the first vigil, spontaneous vigil. I'll tell you candidly, I did not expect much of a turnout. I expected people to be too fearful to gather. We knew so little about what the motivation was of that mass murderer, and it was a reasonable, logical thing for people to close themselves in, shut themselves off, fear for their lives, and just keep their heads down. Probably one of the most healing moments for me was walking out there and seeing that entire lawn packed with people who weren't doing that, people that were doing exactly what you're talking about.
We hope, thank you so much, and we are going to take a break right now, and we'll be back right after this.
There are only so many things that you can train for. When it actually happens, you see the best come out in people. You see what they are really capable of.
I think the response really affirmed the quality and the excellence of the staff. We saw love, we saw compassion, we saw caring.
We asked our team to do things that day that were so far beyond the scope of what their routine is. I have never been prouder of a team collectively as I was during the Pulse incident and for the months afterward.
So it affected all different communities or all different people in our community, and we are part of our community. So, we're here, we're going to continue to be here for our community.
That care, that compassion, that love is not only what, was provided that day, but that's the desire and what we want to provide to anybody that walks through the many doors of Orlando Health.
Welcome back as we continue talking about how our lives changed almost exactly 365 days ago. We'll begin, and I want to let you all know that we have some people in the community who lost loved ones. They are here today. Some have chosen to raise their hand and speak. Others will just sit and listen. As you can imagine, a very difficult time as we relive those moments. So I'm going to step off stage right now with a first question. One of the first people killed, as far as we can tell, was Chris Leinanen. And someone who is his partner is with us today, and you have a question for the panel.
Yes, former partner. I remember Monday 13 on June. I was in the building waiting walking around asking everyone what happens. I need to know something about him. After many, many hours, I just talked to somebody and I said, please tell me what's going on. I need to know if he's alive or not. And this officer say, well, we don't have a room. So I said, well, let's go and get any room. This officer took us in a kitchen like, oh, Christopher Leinanen died in the club, just like that. Why they didn't tell us that he died in a proper way? Why did we have to wait for 33 hours, the longest hours in my life? 33 hours. Why I had to go and ask to a random person, I need to know about what's going on, after asking many, many people, even you. Why 33 hours? And nobody, officer, like a former authority, to tell me, hey, we are gonna talk, we are gonna say, this is what happens. I need to know why 33 hours. That cannot happen again, okay?
Well, first, let me say, I didn't catch your first name. Jose, first let me say my heart goes out to you and all of the families and loved ones of all the victims. We cannot imagine what you endured during those 33 hours, or really this entire year, and I sincerely apologize. You know, some of the issues that law enforcement face when we have the difficult task of identifying and victims and the notification of kin is to get it right. And the last thing that we wanted to do was to tell someone that their loved one had passed when that was not the case. Or the flip side of that is tell someone your loved one is alive and find out later that no, that was actually, so it was imperative and important that we get that information right. And as far as the crime scene, and one of the major reasons that the victims were left in as long as they were is because of the threat of explosives. Earlier in the night, and a lot of this is already public record, that 2 different canine teams had made a positive indication for explosives in the suspect's vehicles. He had made mention of explosives. Many of the hostages had made mention of explosives. There were also things at the scene that led us to believe in the very first hours that there were explosives. So we had to do a very, very methodical search and very carefully go through that entire scene to ensure that bodies weren't booby-trapped, and that's happened in other terrorist situations around the world. Many times in these incidents, the suspects and terrorists leave booby traps for first responders, so there's even more death and destruction after the first wave of deaths. So the way you were notified, you know, I can only apologize for that. I can't imagine what you went through. Obviously, we should have come up with a better system to notify you. So for that, I'm deeply sorry.
Well, we learned from our mistake. I know that, and I hope that it's not going to happen to anyone, because what I said is horrible. So it's just about communication.
Jose, I was there with you at the Beardall Center when we knew that there was one last survivor. And it was horrible because there was one person that was in the hospital unidentified, and we probably had 30 families there. And you were there, and you were there with Christopher's mom, and we were talking, and you said, please, please, you know, let us be the next one to go into the room to meet with the hospital officials to try to identify whether that last survivor. And that was, when I look at everything that went on, that is the one major regret that I have about that we needed to handle that better. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Representative Miller, I would like to talk to you you have a microphone, but I'll come down anyway. Sure, we'll switch. You passed legislation to help in the fight against terrorism. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hoping that'll do?
Sure. First of all, let me say, Jose, I'm sorry to hear that story, and it's tough to follow you because I feel for you, and I feel for the survivors, and thank you all for all the wonderful things you did. I was standing on the street corner that next morning, and I watched the response. I watched the amazing outpouring of love and support. I watched the first responders, everybody, it was an amazing experience. And one of the things I learned, and the FBI was part of that response, was that we need to be better about that, finding out, you know, where are the terrorists. And I don't know if people realize this, but Florida is the third largest or third highest risk for future terrorist acts happening here in this state. So here with Representative Smith, Representative Mercado, I think Senator Simmons is in the audience also. we were listening to that, saying, okay, how can we prevent another terrorist act? And so the legislation that we passed, that the governor signed last week, has to deal with increasing and improving our relationship with the FBI and all the federal agencies that are interacting with our local agencies to make sure that if there is a circumstance where we know somebody's out there, FDLE doesn't necessarily need the FBI to go out and do that investigation on their own and maybe find a suspect before he or she commits a terrorist act. So I think we tried very hard to get on the front end of some of these things, and we learned from a terrible circumstance to try to hopefully keep it from happening again. I also know Representative Smith wants to make a comment about some of the stuff we're talking about with mental illness, and that's another big issue here with the remembrance tonight.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Mental illness, mental health care is a major issue as a consequence of this tragedy. Florida is unfortunately 50th in the nation for funding for mental health care services. My two-part question is, well, for the mayors, what is first the long-term plan with the Orlando United Assistance Center and others that are related to OUAC, other treatment facilities, counseling centers, to have the resources that we need to help this community rebuild, but also want to talk about the LGBTQ community and how they were impacted and what we can do to send a message that Florida is a place that does not tolerate hatred or discrimination against anyone.
The Orlando United Assistance Center will remain open for years. We know that this is not a 12-month process. It's not a 2-year process, and we need to make sure that we have the resources available for people there. And they're largely, I think, mental health counseling services are probably the biggest need, and a lot of people have stepped that up in that regard. The second part of the question, how do we galvanize the support? You know, the entire state is not like Orlando. There are pockets that are like Orlando, but I don't think you can say that every other part of our state is as united and committed to diversity and inclusion as we are here in Orlando.
I'd like to ask Orlando this question. Orlando was known as a culturally diverse, gay-friendly community before Pulse.
Right.
How do you feel? Do you feel that it's still the case now?
Oh, it always has been. It's Orlando, you know, we have the tourist area, the hotels. We have a large LGBT community living and working here. And we never had a problem with no one. Everybody's accepted us. I have straight friends that I brought to the club, and they leave with enjoyment and happiness, you know, respected. So I never felt any prejudice of anything with anybody against our community here.
From there, we go to another community that's been impacted, the Muslim community, also here with us tonight. And I will bring a microphone down there as well, because with Omar Mateen and the comments that he made, I want to find if any members that are here today would care to comment or have a question as it relates to what's being discussed tonight with Pulse.
My name is Naren. I'll go with a statement. So I remember June 12th and the vigil the day after that you were talking about. And the Muslim community was one community that was also affected greatly that night, because with everything that happens, there was always this stigma, or we were afraid that there would be a backlash to the Muslim community. But I have to thank the mayors and the police department and Representative Smith especially for bringing the Muslim community out and showing what Orlando truly is, showing the love, the strength, giving us that hug that night. And it was also our holy month, which currently is going on as well, of Ramadan. And he just had all the right things to say, that you belong, that this isn't about religion, it wasn't about the attack being personal, that this was a terrorism attack, that this was far away from what individuals or what our religion believes in. And the fact that the whole community came together like that in Orlando and stood with us and just said that this is what we are, that we are part of the community, that we belong in this community, that it doesn't matter of our religion, our race, it didn't matter if we were part of the LGBTQ community, it didn't matter if we were Christian or Muslim. But when we walked out there, those free hugs that were all around our community, I mean, we gave blood, water, So it was just everybody coming together. I mean, I'm born here and raised here, and I call Orlando my home, but for just somebody to just, in 1 second, just have that blame on me is not fair. And it happens more than we think, actually, for our community. So I'm happy that Orlando is a place that we can be safe, feel loved, and feel equal and diverse.
Do you feel now, after all this time, that our community still has Pulse on the forefront?
Oh, absolutely. I relate to them tremendously. My parents are immigrants from Iran, and they come from a Muslim background where my father came here to give his family a better life. And regardless of religion, regardless of sex, regardless of every combined thing that you can think of, we're people. And the people that were at Pulse that night were not just gay, they were people. Mm-hmm. And we've been put into a category of so many different things. And everywhere that I've gone to speak, I've said, we're not a category. We're considered people. And we deserve to be known as people. And people were hated on that night. But everywhere I've gone, people have supported. I was just in Sweden this past weekend, and this woman walked up to me and she started crying. And she said, I feel your love. I feel for your people what happened in Orlando. And it has gone all over the world. They have really accepted what happened and embraced it.
Barbara Poma, a lot of Orlando Strong, a lot of going forward will be the decision that you make in terms of how this is memorialized. And I know that you own the Pulse nightclub. You decided not to sell it to the city. Mm-hmm. Where do we go with the memorial? What do you see as we sit here 1 year out?
You know, the memorial is exactly what you're talking about. As far as keeping Orlando strong, it is what is going to be built here to connect our city to the world and keep it connected. And it will be the beacon to keep the 49 angels, you know, with us and then keep their names alive. How soon do we see that decision? I know that you've asked several people to help. There is an organization that's behind that decision, but when do you think that we'll move forward with that as we now are approaching again 1 year? The project is an extremely long project. It will take years to get it completed. We are in the very infant stage of all of it. We've had 2 meetings. We are working on our survey process, which once, you know, the survey is a very important part of the process. We want to make sure we get it right. The data we collect from that will eventually go towards creating a design and going through a design process. So, you know, it will be a long time before you see something happen to the building. We are contemplating doing a temporary memorial, making some changes to how it exists now to beautify the area, to help SODO and to just freshen the place up and give it a new look for a little while, because it is a long journey through this process.
And why did you want to keep the property and not sell it?
Just historically, the memorials that have been built in our country in 9/11 as well as in Oklahoma City were done by a task force. They were done by a foundation. So there was no need for the governments to do that. It was actually harder for the government to do it than it will be for us to do it as a 501c3. So it really just kept the process going a little bit more smoothly and quicker. In terms of that building, what do you think is appropriate right now, just on first glance?
I think the direction she's going in, I'm a part of the task force. That's why I get first. Immediately when she wanted to involve families, I knew that it was the right direction of family survivors and victims. I was proud to be a part of that task force to give my opinion. And which is, in my opinion, I believe that the way that the memorial process is going right now, which is a slow process, we're building up to what we think that if the building should stay up, it should come down. Really, we're letting all of us as a team decide, and then when that gets decided, then we'll know. I mean, it's just not my
decision.
Yeah.
Orlando, have you been by the building?
Yeah, I have, and my thoughts of it, is keeping the building there, because that's been a landmark for, what, 12 years there, and known and recognized. And the inside, I think it should be kept looking as if it was the club. It's just, instead of stuff there that is used by the club, it's pictures, portraits, stuff that were donated, placed in certain areas, so that people can come in and feel what we were there in spirit, and still there for the spirit of the 49. To know, understand, this is where we came and shared love, entertainment, fun. You know what I mean? I just think it should be kept almost like the club look, but, you know, fixed up. And with stuff hung on walls, pictures, or, you know, stuff that is donated, you know. And so people have the true spirit of what we lived in there.
Does it get easier as the weeks go by, as the months get by?
As the anniversary is nearby, I've admitted to myself I'm getting scared, because it's a big event, and I know so many people, and I know I've lost many friends that were injured and shot. It's tough to face this again and see, but I'm still trying to stay strong and support the best I can, because, you know, God left me here for a reason, and that's why I'm on that mission to be the voice of the 49 or the 52 others, and support anybody that needs it, and be the voice, and just shine for the 49 and the 52 others.
How do the patients that had physical injuries, how are they doing? What's the long-term prognosis of those that you and your team kept alive?
Sure. So, you know, there are some patients that stick out in your mind. There's some that do more than others, and you know, I can just say for the few that stick out in my mind that I see in the office, and over the past year, you know, to see them a month out, to see them 3 months out, you know, each time their smile's a little brighter, and they're a little bit more happy. Maybe somebody's gone back to work, maybe somebody's gone back to school. You know, some people still need things done that they're not ready to have yet, and that's okay.
Surgeries.
Yes. But everybody seems to be on the right track to.
And you're still
improve it.
connected with them.
Yes.
How do we make certain we keep that momentum going to pay for the mental health services, the physical counseling that Dr. Smith, the physical repairs to people's, you know, bodies, the surgeries? How do we make sure that we have that money going forward?
I think our community is committed to that. You see that every day with acts of love and kindness that occur all the time, the commitment to the assistance center, the commitment to the victims and the families. We raised over $30 million without really doing fundraising of any sort. That was money that came in because people wanted to help. So I don't see that ending at all.
And part of the healing process is to talk about it. So we do want to open it up another time in these final minutes to our audience.
Robin Maynard, I'm part of the One Orlando Alliance, formed over 30 LGBTQ communities and organizations came together, and also Vice President for Pulse of Orlando when we started a nonprofit to help. And for me, we've reflected and we've looked back, and I think we also need to look forward. There are so many families and so many, you know, we talk about 53 injured, 49 taken. There are hundreds mentally wounded. They're not in a physical wheelchair, but they're a lot in mental wheelchairs. And I know Representative Smith, I know it's in Representative Miller. It's very important that we continue to do that. And I just want to make sure that the resources remain available, that we continue to look forward, and that we remember the 49 every day.
Thank you, Robin. Anyone else with a comment or question?
Thanks. My name is Josh Will. I'm with the Islamic Center of Orlando. You know, for us at the Islamic Center, we're in the middle of Ramadan, just as we were last year, and it's a very kind of difficult process because on one hand, you know, we're a mosque, and so, you know, we're a place of worship. We're a place where people come for comfort. But with an anniversary or with any kind of, honestly, there's a number of days throughout the year. Election Day is a scary day for us. 4th of July is a scary day for us. Memorial Day recently was a scary day for us. You know, days when you know, people who, you know, have not picked up on the message of love yet. These are scary times, and, you know, tomorrow's going to be a scary day for us. You know, we are going to have our prayers. You know, we're going to have our dinners. There's going to be a lot of community gathered. You know, we're going to have a vigil, a small prayer for our side of kind of Central Florida, for our community there, remembering Pulse as well. But at the same time, like the fear of, someone coming, or the threat is very real for us. And it was very real all month long last year throughout Ramadan, starting with June 12th, because it's still scary where we're at.
Very good. It's good to hear the perspectives of all people involved. And Josh and of course, Muslim community, of course, thank you for coming out tonight and being a part of our discussion. Are there any other comments that people would like to make? Again, we do know that we have some victims' families here, and we thank you for being here. As you saw, we lost Corey Connell. His father is here, and your comment or question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hold it a little closer if you could.
Okay. I want to thank Orlando. I have nothing to say. I just want to thank some people. Thank Orlando Health. Barbara, you're an awesome lady. Awesome lady. You have made my family everything you've done. You have made us be a part of it. These two gentlemen right here, these officers, I don't think you get the credit you deserve. I think you did what you could do that night. And, there's only two people to blame, him and his wife. I don't call his name, never will. His wife could have took care of this. She could have solved this problem. But for you, sir, you showed up at my house the next morning. And I didn't see an officer. I seen a father. I seen a man that was very hard to tell me that my son wasn't coming home. I appreciate that. You, Miss Jacobs, you are so awesome. This lady was at my son's funeral. She loved and supported, along with Mr. Dyer. She loved and supported my family that day. It was incredible. I thank you. I'll never forget that. Dyer, Mr. Dyer, you and our little community of College Park, you guys were awesome. You rolled out the red carpet. I had to do nothing. Everything was taken care of for my son. I appreciate that. And you two gentlemen, no one will ever know what you have to live with every single day. God bless you. God bless all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connell. And again, I can't think of a more appropriate way to finish this evening. Tomorrow is the anniversary. And we'll start with you on the end, Dr. Smith, and move our way down. What will tomorrow be like? What will you do on June 12th?
Well, it's a Monday. I'll go to work. I will, there's a breakfast for the first responders at our church at First Presbyterian of Orlando, and I'll probably attend that, and then hopefully be able to take some time to myself and just kind of think about it, and then go home to my family and think about it as we did that night. I really can't remember what I did when I got home from work that night, and so hopefully, just reflection. And
Barbara?
For me, it will be somewhat of a 24-hour vigil. And there'll be events that are on Pulse's site that I will be at. There will be the city event down at the Van Shell that I will be at. For me, I consider it a day of service for our angels, a day of service for our families, for our survivors, and for my staff.
I think for me it'll be also a day of reflection. June the 12th is a day that I always remember. It was my birthday, and so I'll probably for the second year in a row not really celebrate per se on my birthday. So I will look forward to spending some time with family.
Chief Mina?
Yeah, there are many events that weekend, that day, and the days afterwards. My main priority will be the safety of our community and keeping everyone extremely safe. We will be laser focused on that. But I will definitely take time to do some acts of kindness and love. And I think I'm going to do what I did last year. at Lake Eola. I'm going to go around. I'm going to try and be the face of our first responders and try and hug and shake as many hands as I can, because there's a lot of people that want to thank our law enforcement officers.
I plan to start the day in the early morning hours at Pulse with Barbara and the team. And there, as Barbara mentioned, there are going to be a lot of different events tomorrow. But I think in addition to attending the vigils and different events, I think one of the things that's going to be important to me is to spend a little bit of time at the History Center reflecting on those that we lost and reflecting on those that were injured and are still recovering.
Mayor?
So hopefully I'll get a little sleep before the day starts, because we are going to start early at a memorial service at Pulse at 2:02 in the morning, and there's a number of other public events that I will attend. But I think what I want to do is reflect and remember those who were lost, but also to be mindful of how resilient and how proud I am of our community.
Nima.
I have a busy day tomorrow. I will be on the property for more than 24 hours at Pulse. We have put together some great programs of love, and so hopefully everybody will come join us.
How about you?
It's going to be a long day for sure. There's many events going on, a lot of ceremonies and to represent and being there and supporting and seeing friends. Hopefully I see those that I haven't seen since the shooting, because there's many of them that I haven't, and I'm hoping they'll be out there and I can be there to give them a hug and show my love, my support and love for them, and made a lot of new friends that on the social media that are coming into town to see me and calling me their hero and everything else, so that I could be there and hug them just as well and give the love and support.
We can't thank our panel enough, our members of the community enough for being here. And as we go forward, I think the one thing we all saw tonight, not that we needed to see it again because I think we all felt it, is that we really are Orlando strong, Orlando united. And this is a place that I've lived for 31 years, and I couldn't be prouder to call Orlando home. So on behalf of Channel 9, thank you all for being here and sharing your stories.
And we hope that this town hall continues to be a healthy conversation. As Dwight, you said, we have to talk in order to grow and get through it and keep us all safe in the future. We want to thank you for watching this special presentation of Eyewitness News. Good night.